curious to get your opinion. Which one do you find to be the more complete, dominant unit, and why?
This is it's funny you asked this, and so I just finished coaching football for 3 years, coaching high school football, which I was asked to do. I don't know any. I learned, but just because of like my coaching the heart and stuff. So the unit guys, we have heart. I mean, people meet me and are just unimpressed. I mean, I'm just a 5'7" like dude, but you don't want to go against me like still, you know what I mean? I will go against anybody and win. Like it's just in me. But man, I mean, I know some SEAL Team 6 guys and they just I don't know, have better recruiting. They are just bigger and studlier. So it's like if it's gonna be UFC, we're probably gonna lose. Because we got just a lot of skinny, scrawny guys, but little guys I know that killed more people than malaria. Uh, so I don't know, man. It's just SEAL Team 6, they're more impressive looking and sounding, and they're good dudes. Like I met them, man. We work together sometimes over there, and I caught up with some of them on the TV show SEAL Team. So a lot of that hostility went away as you meet them and talk to them and stuff.
Right.
I mean, one of them put a laser on me, and I can never forgive that. Like we're getting out of to go on a patrol, and this guy points his laser at me and my team leader, and like he's thinking we're bad guys, and it's like, so yeah, that was a problem.
How did that situation get resolved?
Oh God, man, it's like that's when our commanders really step in when we do units joint things together. Um, they're awesome. We're better at hostage rescue. And I was talking about somebody's grabbing this. It's like, pain. That's our bread and butter. So
That's a good answer. They're better looking, is what you're saying. But if
yeah,
you got to get a hostage, call Delta Force.
yep.
I had someone tell me, outside of an interview, that DEVGRU is more fun, but the unit is where the real hitters are at. But everyone's turned on at all times, and that can be very, very stressful because there's no down moments, there's no mistakes tolerated. Was that your experience, that there was very little room for error when you're in the Army's SMU?
Well, I think in both places, with Dev Group and us, everybody was there for a reason. Everybody wanted to excel and to be in the top spot. Granted, we always make fun of each other. I mean, it's the fighting with the stepbrother type thing,
Right.
But I think on both sides equally, guys wanted to do the job and do everything. They had a better place to live. Definitely Virginia Beach over Fayetteville. But I think also, yeah, they were a little bit more lax in a different way, not in a bad way. But then, we had still the camaraderie, everything else. A lot of guys were, Rangers, so they grew up under that. Rogers aren't. I mean, and then you had the SF guys but we all kind of knew what was what, and we knew what the job was, and we focused on that. But we still had a great time, and I think it was a true family. I mean, because like before we deploy, the whole squadron get together, things like that with the families, and a lot of parties along the way in and around. But you guys got a lot of strong-willed guys, and everybody's there. It's like being in the NFL.
Well, that's a good. That's another perfect segue. Now, Bob knows what's coming because I ask this in literally every military interview I do. SEAL Team 6 versus Delta Force, like the most popular debate in the history of the military.
Take it away, boys. There's a debate about it.
Well, there is a huge debate. So now we've got Bob on the record on this from the previous interview. He gave a very diplomatic answer, but it was a good answer. You two, what are your thoughts on the differences and which one's better? Take it away.
Oh, you just had to do it, didn't you?
I think that's what I said too.
So here's the deal. For me, those guys are some of the greatest fucking dudes out there, right? I got a lot of fucking friends out there. We've worked with them a lot over the years, and I got nothing but respect for them cats, for sure. So,
Who's better though, Gilly? Who's better?
well, I'm going to say I'm better, right? I'm going to say we're better, right? But I'm sure they'll say they're better, right? And that's what you should do, right? Because that's your organization. We all have our niches, we all have what we're good at. And, I can only hope that we complement each other out there. Yeah, I'm doing the politically correct answer right here.
That's way more politically correct than I was.
Yeah, that was more politically correct.
I mean,
So
but
I'm not gonna be.
it's true though. I mean, that's the bottom line. I hope we can complement each other out there. And if, they're not the force that should be picked to do it, then we should, right? So, I mean, that's just kind of what it boils down to.
All right, Nate, what's your thoughts?
So I'm going to repeat something that a friend of mine, Mike, told me or said to me a long time ago, right? I think the SEAL Team 6 guys are cut from the exact same piece of cloth as we are, right? If they would have joined the Army instead of the Navy, they would have been in Delta Force, right? But they came up in a different organization with different culture and different, right? I think those guys I've got some friends there. They're awesome dudes. I think those guys are great, really great at what they do. But Delta Force is definitely better, right? And the reason I know is because I don't know a single guy that has left the unit to go to SEAL Team 6, but I know of guys leaving SEAL Team 6 to come to the unit. So,
Truth.
Well, in my interview with Chris Van Zant, he said on one of their deployments that they had a SEAL Team 6 guy with them. And
yeah, we had him attached to us.
Yeah, like how the meshing either did well or didn't use. So I thought that was interesting. I got to ask, I've got the opportunity to do some SEAL Team 6 interviews and meet some of those guys and hang out with some of those guys. And yeah, no, I like them a lot too. I have all the respect in the world for them. I do like to stir the pot though, because the internet definitely enjoys getting the debate going.
Of course.
All right. I asked this question to everyone in the military I interview, and it's only pissed one person off. Delta versus SEAL Team 6. Who's better and why?
Well, who are you asking?
Well, I'm asking you.
Other unit guys, or are you asking?
I've asked that. I've asked that to other Delta Force guys, multiple Navy SEALs, Marine Rangers.
I wish I would have listened to some of the interviews then to know what they said.
Well, here, I'll tell you this. The guy that shot bin Laden, Rob O'Neill, I asked him that question, and he was very diplomatic with it. He had nothing but high praise for Delta Force. And in fact, his exact quote was, they fought like motherfuckers in Iraq when they hit the ground. So he kind of said it'd be a split. He thought it was, he wouldn't say anything bad. He praised the hell out of you guys. But what's your answer? Explain why Delta is better than SEAL Team 6.
I mean, no one wants to piss each other off because we're all a fucking team, right?
I get it. Yep.
I mean, but I would think if they truly were fucking thinking of this by themselves and just not saying it to someone else, they're gonna agree we're the best. I mean, well, I think it is. It is because the individual. I think the reason why we're better is we have a better selection process, and I think our age difference is a lot different than theirs. And we instead of just grabbing your fucking guns, getting a helicopter and going, like, we actually think about things. Not that they don't either, but I think we're more meticulous on who we're gonna go after and when we're gonna go after it. Right, instead of just being like the whole like everyone always kids about the SEALs being with the movies and frickin' the TV shows and the books and stuff. Like when you're at the unit, like, you're not thinking of that. I mean, you're actually thinking of success. You're thinking about doing things the right way. You're not thinking about the glory of it or the book side of it or the movie side of it. Not that all of them are doing that. But I would say we're better just because we think a little bit more before going on target.
Well, that's a very fair answer. That was a diplomatic answer as well. But when
But but it's funny though. It is so, to be fair about it and kind of diplomatic about it. It all comes down to individual troops and the individual teams. So you might have one troop on one side way better than a troop on the other side, but then you also have another troop over here that's way better than a troop over here. It all comes down to your leadership and the dudes that are underneath the leadership telling them, how things should be done. So I think it could go either way, depending on the team or the troop or the squadron.
When they got Bin Laden, were the Delta guys like, what the hell? Why didn't we get the phone?
We were pissed.
I've always wondered that.
That kid, yeah, I mean, there was people that wanted to quit. Trust, I mean, that I'll talk to you offline on that. It was like, that was a fucking sore subject.
Oh,
and how that all went down. I'm not going to explain it on here, but it to me, end state on why it was the fair thing to do for them to do it. But there's a lot more that went into it.
Well, we can leave it at that. We can leave it at that. We don't need to start a civil war here between
exactly.
But the reason I brought it up, so this is 100% true story. This happened in a room full of people. I asked that question to a guy outside of an interview. He's a former Navy SEAL. It's happened about 3 years ago. Okay, packed room of people. I asked him in a joking way, SEAL Team 6, Delta Force. I shit you not, and I've said this publicly in other interviews. This guy looked like he was ready to fight. Like I had insulted him so much by even asking the question. And I saw that same guy about a year later, and he was still pissed about it. I mean, he held like a grudge. It was every other Navy SEAL, they laugh about it, they debate it.
And so would we.
This guy was so unbelievably pissed, it would blow your mind.
No shit. Really. I'll say this. I have never met any of those guys because I was on a water team. I'd go over there and like pick their brains on shit because we're not water guys, right?
Right.
And I have literally not met one of those guys that I didn't think was a fucking squared away dude.
I believe it.
I'll say that, there's not one guy that I ever met was like, oh, this dude's a fucking turd. So.
Well, hey, that's good. We're the United States of America. Our military, SEALs, whatever.
We're all part of the same team, right?
Right. We're all fighting for the same goal, in and outside the military.
So I ask a question to all of the tier 1 guys I interview, and you are by far, I would say, the one in a unique position to answer it. So I interviewed a guy by the name of Chris Van Zant almost a year ago at this point from the same unit you served in. And he talked about how when SEAL Team DEVGRU guys came over in Iraq, similar to what you were talking about earlier, how they, I don't know if you'd say augmented or they used them to kind of fill roles, right? It might have been the same years for all I know that he was talking about. From your experience, how similar are those two units? Because they're kind of big rivals. And then what would be the difference in like simplified terms for the audience between the guys in DEVGRU and then guys that are in the unit?
So I'll tell you this. I'll say this about Dev Group, and then I'll say this about, quite frankly, 24 NATO, high-end special operations units. In my experience, and I'm speaking for myself, by and large, the guys, all the same.
I've heard that before, yeah.
Freaking Grom, freaking KSK, you name it. It's the same guys, the same mentality across all of them. In fact, even like I know when Larry Vickers went to Russia, years ago, the Alpha Group guys, he was like, dude, they're just like us, So the guys are the same, and the Dev Group guys, as far as the guys, same. I would say the differences are in the overall units, in the structure, and to me, the biggest difference between those two units, and again, my opinion, is that everyone on Dev is a SEAL. everyone. They're all SEALs. So they have a major basis of similarity because they all come from the teams. The unit recruits not just Army-wide, but U.S. military-wide. To give you an example, when I got blown up, the guy that got blown up with me, standing literally right next to me, before he was in the unit, he was a Navy hard hat diver.
No shit. Wow.
So the guys there come from, you could have people from the Marine Corps, you could have people from, a Navy hard hat diver, you could have Rangers, SF, you could have, there's so many different backgrounds. And so both of those things, in my opinion, having everyone have the same common background has its advantages and disadvantages. And then having everyone have completely different backgrounds has its advantages and its disadvantages. But I think that's the huge fundamental difference in those two units. And those advantages and disadvantages, I believe those are that's the basis cause of those different personalities of each unit.
A few months back, I interviewed a guy from SEAL Team 6 by the name of Rob O'Neill, who was the shooter on the Bin Laden raid. And I asked him, and I asked everyone I interview in the military, if you were in charge, SEAL Team 6 versus Delta Force, who would you take? And he gave a very funny answer, split it down the middle, but he gave you guys a huge compliment. And he was the first person that from the Navy side to ever say this. He said he was in Iraq and he saw you guys for the first time in action and he was blown away. He said his exact quote was, "I stood there for a second in fanboy and said, that's Delta Force." So I'm curious, Delta Force versus SEAL Team 6, who are you taking and why? Obviously you're biased, but let's hear the answer.
Yeah. So Army 100%. Yeah, I've got a lot of friends on the Navy side. I've actually done a lot of work with my Navy brethren over the years. I've actually been a part of a couple really significant missions with just me and one other SEAL. So I know a lot of them well. We always get asked this question. I'll give you a little piece of history. I'll tell you that the units evolve very differently, right? How they recruit, assess, train, select, etc., are very different. The Army was very much you got to earn your way there. The Navy kind of at that level, once you're a SEAL, when you're moving on to the tier 1 asset, sure, there's some training and selection that goes on, but it's a lot of who you know and who you served with, or at least it used to be. And it also creates kind of two different cultures in the Army. The Army, and not to say that they're not in the Navy, but the Army breeds leaders. Like from day one, you're as you move up from a rifleman to team leader, and you learn how to lead a couple of people, and then you're a squad leader and you learn how to lead a squad of people, and then you're a platoon sergeant, you learn how to lead a platoon, and so on and so on and so on. And there's professional development along the way to go along with those milestones. But the Army's really good at breeding leaders like that. So it creates a little bit of different culture just because of the Navy versus Army thing. But in the early days of Iraq, so we had left Afghanistan to pursue the invasion of Iraq, and the Navy was charged with continuing the Afghanistan mission. And when I say Navy, SEAL Team 6. And General McChrystal was the JSOC commander at the time, Stan McChrystal, who was a Ranger by trade most of his career. But Stan McChrystal had the idea that he wanted to conduct a unit exchange. And he wanted, elements from the Army to send folks to Afghanistan to do a deployment with the SEALs. And he wanted the SEALs to send us a bunch of guys to do a deployment to Iraq with us. And his idea was, it was a cross-leveling of information. It was a cross-leveling of training. It would basically, he wanted to have two pieces that he could maneuver around the chessboard that were interchangeable. I will tell you what he found out was that we're not interchangeable, that we have two different mission sets and different skill sets. Navy guys, they do a lot of boat work. They do a lot of stuff around the water that while we do some of those things, that's not our bread and butter. We do some things that they don't. without discussing what those are. Some of those are classified, but there's mission sets that Delta does that the SEALs don't. But the level of training and the skill sets involved are very similar. So that first rotation that we ever did in exchange, one of my teammates went to Afghanistan with the Navy, and had his own experience with them. And then we took in a guy from them along with 2 other teams in my troop. And it was one of the best dudes I ever served with. He was a rock star, really solid performer, good shooter, fast, really blend in with our team very, very quickly. But at the end of that rotation, of the 3 guys that were assigned to my troop, one of them was a Navy SEAL team leader. And he actually said to our troop, he said, I just want to tell you guys, he's like, I've been an Army hater my entire career. I've been in the Navy for 23 years. I'm a team leader in SEAL Team 6. And you guys are the best trained, most competent unit I have ever been around. And I learned more in 90 days than I did in most of my time as a Navy SEAL.
Well, there you go.
That was 2003.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you, present day, those 2 units are interchangeable. That they've got some of the best individuals in the world on both sides, and they can both execute the majority of the mission sets interchangeably, and they do. So who gets the call and when and where depends on so many factors, but one of them is not who's better suited to do it.
So that's a very comprehensive answer. I like that. But when something like you just said, who gets the mission depends on a variety of factors. When the Bin Laden raid went down, and obviously they go with SEAL Team 6, were the Delta guys like, damn, I really wish that had been us?
Sure, absolutely. I can tell you, during the invasion of Iraq, I was in the middle of the desert at war conducting missions every day. And the Jessica Lynch mission went down where they rescued Jessica, which hardly any shots fired, but she was a hostage taken prisoner by Iraqis, and they pulled her out of that hospital. We were pissed that they did it because hostage rescue was our bread and butter, but we were engaged. It made more sense to take a unit that was flexible, that was already over there and able to go execute, than it did to pull us out of what we were doing to go do it. Bin Laden, there's a lot of backstory there too. You know, some of it depends on particular leadership positions that are in certain locations. You know, sometimes they have more experience with one unit or the other. It just kind of depends on where they fell in the food chain on the officer side coming up. But that plays into it. Sometimes who knows the battle space better plays into it. You know, if it's a ship takedown, the logical, you know, situation is always going to be the Navy. If it's aircraft related, it's going to be the Army, so on and so on. But yeah, there is always professional jealousy when one gets to do it and the other doesn't. I can tell you when the Bin Laden raid happened, I was as happy as could be. I was as happy for my brothers on the Navy side as anybody. I was just as pumped as if it had been my old unit that did it. And I was happy to hear from the guys when they got back and talked about it.
That's pretty much what I've heard from everyone else. So now I asked this question in different forms to everyone in the military who's a special forces guy I interview. I'm very curious to see what you say. I just did an interview a few weeks ago. I had a very interesting response. We're going to say SEAL. I'm going to throw you a scenario. I want you to be totally honest. SEAL Team 6 guys, you're in a bar. Let's say there's 10 of you. 10 Delta Force guys come in. Everyone's had a bit to drink. There's a bunch of single women in the bar. Who's gonna get the women, and who's gonna win the bar fight? 10 Delta Force guys, 10 SEAL Team 6 guys.
See, the thing with that is I think the majority of the SEALs are gonna get the women because our hair is a lot better and we know how to surf better. And we won't, we're going to tell stories even if it's not true. Delta's very good about being professional. So as far as the women go, the fight is a tough one because I know their combatives program is really good. And I know ours is really good too. The issue with fighting and the issue with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now is you don't know who knows what. Like I'm not going to fight the dude with a man bun on a scooter outside because he might be a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know that. I'm going to say the fight's not going to happen. There will be some shit talking. We'll get drunk together, maybe one fight, maybe two fights. I'll say it goes 50-50 for the two guys that actually fight that don't know how to fight because the other guys are tough enough to not know what the other one knows. I think that's fair.
Did you, that's a very fair, that was a very politician answer.
I have most respect for Delta Force. So
that's what I was just going to ask. Did you ever cross paths with them very often during your career?
We worked with them quite a bit. And to be perfectly honest, The first time, I mean, we had them at our command in Virginia and we trained with them. The first time I saw them was in Iraq, because they took Iraq, and boy, those dudes fought like motherfuckers. The first time I saw them get off like little birds, I remember like fanboying a little bit. I'm like, holy shit, that's Delta Force. That's legit. And I was
That's
super
awesome.
time, yeah.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Now, this is my favorite question to ask, and it always spins people up depending on what branch they're from. The old classic SEAL Team 6 Delta Force debate. You obviously were a unit guy, but in your mind, are they equivalent? Is there a gap between the two?
They're not equivalent. They weren't.
Take it away.
If you go back to the original charter, which most fuckers don't, not even the fucking SEALs, you go back to the original charter, the SEALs were created to render a ship safe. What does that mean? They take the engine room to make sure it doesn't crash, no one gets hurt, right? And the helo assault force, right, is what clears the ship. That's the unit. This is the charter. It's been like this since fucking 1986 when they put it on fucking paper. Now, having said that, the unit was created as a standalone counter-terrorist organization that reported right to the Pentagon JCS. Now, those linkages are still there, even though the Army's gone ahead and there's a fucking million officers these days. There's more officers probably fucking enlisted. Who does the work in the Army? Who fucking knows? But over the years, they added layers of bullshit over the top of that. So the unit went from reporting right to the JCS to JSOC to SOCOM, right? But the linkage is still there. And the unit was created to be standalone. It needs nothing, right?
Right, because you guys have your...
It wasn't created to do long-term warfare, but it was created to be standalone. The Navy was created, right, to do a waterside terrorism, but they were never created to stand alone because we already had a primary hostage rescue unit that could be another force. What we need is very specific stuff. And this is how the charter actually started and was written. And that's the logic behind where the charter was at the time, right? So the SEALs cannot deploy without JSOC. The unit can. So
Gotcha.
The unit needs no one to deploy, and they have all their own people, right? The SEALs have to depend on augmentees to run their support out of JSOC, and JSOC just does the lottery order to fucking, oh, we need supply guys, put the lottery, fucking, someone will get ordered and come here. So having said that, the SEALs could never be an equivalent to the unit because they weren't created to do any of that and still are not.
So that leads into the next question, which I'm sure you're going to figure out what it is. When they did Neptune Spear, flew into Pakistan and shot bin Laden, what was the feeling within the Army side of like, hey, why were they chosen and not Delta?
Oh, easy. Agency playing games.
What do you
I don't give
explain
a fuck if it's bin Laden. I don't care who it is. If you got the intel and you're not going to tell me the whole fucking story for whatever reason, the unit's going to tell you no.
So you think that, so was the unit initially offered, were they initially in the mix, and when they didn't get a full intel package, they were like, fuck off?
Yep.
And then they went with SEAL Team 6?
Yep.
That's interesting. I'd never heard that before.
I think there's another major factor in there is you got McCraven, who's a fucking admiral.
And he was a former SEAL Team 6 guy. That's correct, right?
Mm-hmm. And so I think when the unit told him to fuck off because the intel was didn't have any intel. There's no intel. So think about that. Every other target we needed intel on, but yet you're just going to give me an address for this guy?
Right. Seems a little sketchy.
I think there is some wonky shit going on. I believe the unit probably told him to fuck off. And in the same breath, the admiral was like, amazing, because I know guys that won't ask any questions that'll do this.
Interesting. Well, so that's another interesting point of view. I mean, obviously Delta smoked the head of ISIS now back to back 2 years apart. They got Baghdadi, and then they got that dickhead that came after him, 4 months ago or so. I've just always find that interesting. I ask that to everyone I interview. They all have opinions all over the place. The Delta guys stick obviously with the Delta side. The Navy guys are, of course, sticking with their side. But anyways,
most of the guys you talked to wasn't the money sergeant major that held the Navy's money also and the unit's money. And most of them didn't see both. Most of them didn't sit at the flagpole where the charter was written and understand how it was supposed to pan out. And I would tell you this, you probably haven't talked to one guy that has been in my position to see all that.
Well, that's very true. And that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
you know, what's funny is all the time people are like, oh, you just hate the SEALs. No, I don't. Matter of fact, the reason I say this is, well, I held a part of their budget. I seen it firsthand.
Right. And I think you would say this as well. Those guys are still excellent shooters. Like those guys show up, they're capable of killing bad guys at a high level, obviously.
I would say they're as capable as a really good SF team.
Yeah, I've heard that comparison before.
Yeah.
All right.
I know SF teams that will fucking smoke those guys too.
Fair enough. This was a question from a fan. Have you ever had to steal a vehicle during a mission?
Man, that's a great question. I think I've stole about 38 or 40 cars and bags.
There you go. So the answer to that, to the fan out there watching is, and do they give you guys training, obviously, before you go, of like, here's how you hotwire a car, here's how you get it going or whatever? I don't know shit about that.
I am a master carjacker and locksmith, yes.
That is badass. That's